Well, hello and good morning, everybody. Could I invite our panelists to come and join us on the stage, please, for the next session? So, Commissioner Kyrillakidis, lovely, thank you for joining us. And we have Andrέas Χαραλάμπους from the University of Cyprus. And online we have panelists from the European Parliament and also from Alberto Costa from the European School of Oncology. And I think, do we have Nikos Papandreou with us? He's online, is he? Okay, super. So thank you for joining this morning's session on EU cancer policy, unlocking the power of the multi-annual financial framework of the European Union. My name is Richard Price. I'm the Policy Director at the European Cancer Organisation. We're an umbrella federation of healthcare professionals, patients, and many others working in cancer care. And we aim to try to facilitate the provision of a united voice to policymakers in Brussels and across centres of decision-making in Europe, including Athens. So you can think of us like a ΕΛΛΟΚ for Europe. And I'm delighted to introduce my co-moderator for this session, Kostas.
Kalimera from me as well. It's going to be an interesting discussion with this one, I think. And trying to introduce a bit, a few elements about the discussion going on for the next few years on the MFF. And I think that this will actually influence quite a few things at the European level, but also at the national level. So we're looking forward to the contributions to the panel.
Yes, I think, and I congratulate ΕΛΛΟΚ for having the foresight to put this topic onto the agenda, because so many of the projects and initiatives that we've already heard about this morning, joint actions on personalised cancer medicine, enhancing digital capabilities for cancer centres, networks of expertise across Europe on specific areas of cancer care, implementation of screening programmes, there's a very long list, and they're all making an impact in countries across Europe, including Greece. They're raising standards, they're raising expectations, and providing means and tools for countries to have off-the-shelf solutions to some of the common problems and challenges they face. But none of them would have been possible without the support that was achieved for cancer to be an EU priority delivered under the leadership of former Commissioner Kyriakidis. And more on that later. And to help frame our discussion, I thought we could just recap a little bit on that history and provide a little bit of a sense of the political moment we're in. So could I ask for the slides to be projected? We have just a few to run us through. There we are. Thank you. Well, it's very hard to summarise in a single PowerPoint slide the radical new departure that Europe's Beating Cancer Plan marked when it was published 5 years ago to this week for World Cancer Day in 2021. Prior to its publication, health initiatives had really only been a side thought of EU-level considerations, if we were being frank. But perhaps reflecting that moment of its creation, it was in the midst of the COVID pandemic era, it showed bold ambition of what could be imagined, and still more, what might be realised through proper implementation. So a significant year of consultation was taken to develop its contents, its structure, its actions and goals, and it's provided now a model for national cancer plans. And I heard Mark van der Bolke talking, for example, how Belgium has really adopted the structure of the European Cancer Plan as a means to galvanise and help all regions in Belgium meet the same goals. So those goals include eliminating HPV-associated cancers, creating a tobacco-free Europe, and significantly boosting access to screening and comprehensive cancer care. And it's now very much in operational phase. If we could go to the next slide, please. But over the past 5 years, next slide, please. Thank you very much. The world has not stood still. Dramatic changes in the geopolitical environment have included military hostility by Russia towards Europe, the trading challenges that we have with the current US administration, and the ongoing rise of China as a major global superpower. And all of this has bred some certain insecurities at the EU level, which do suggest themselves as needing to be reflected in the next 7-year budget of the European Union. So if we go to the next slide, please, we can see what is on the proposal table at the current time. So it's quite a significant amount of proposed change from the European Commission. And what would it mean for cancer specifically? Well, the disappearance of the EU for Health programme, which has funded the joint actions and other initiatives that we've mentioned, obviously raises some concern. It is placed within a common bracket in competitiveness alongside agriculture, bioeconomy and other topics. So the ECO, we are more than a little bit concerned about what that could mean for the long-term sustainability and legacy of the cancer plan. Other significant changes include quite a reshaping or proposed reshaping of regional funding programs, and if you have family or relatives involved in the agriculture sector, you may have heard of that, but we do see some opportunities to perhaps better support countries and regions in making long-term investments in cancer care from that. Now, the reason we are choosing today to talk about it is because this is not a settled deal either. If we go to the next slide, please. What's important to note is all of this is subject to debate, discussion, scrutiny, and potential amendment by your elected representatives, by your national government, but also members of the European Parliament. And you'll see the flags there as well on the screen for Cyprus and for Greece. And they have more than a say in this because both countries are holding the EU presidency of the Council. And that means they get to shape some of the discussions that countries have on this. They get to put proposals on the table. And I think that's something with ΕΛΛΟΚ and PASICAF and other partners will be continuing to look to make some use of. If we go to the next slide, just to help frame some of the things we think are necessary to be changed in that proposal, we'd like to see something like a 2 billion European Cancer Fund to be established that would sustain and secure the legacy of Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan. We'd like to see the confirmed maintenance of the research mission on cancer by being included in the future research moonshots that are being put on the table. And we want much clearer encouragement that regional funding, which is a very big bracket of EU funding, can be used to bridge cancer inequalities, to pay for vaccination, screening programs, workforce development, many of the other needs that countries do need to find investment sources for. So, final slide. If you'd like to read into this more, like to get a bit more informed, please do visit reachhigherforcancercare.eu. We've created something very special with the cancer plan and the mission, but it must be continued into the future and not lost to other priorities. So, with that background out of the way, I think we'd like now to turn to our panel to discuss this in more detail. And we've got a great array of perspectives to draw on, two very active members of the European Parliament with us, key figures in the implementation of Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan. But most of all, may I say, it's an enormous pleasure and honour to have with us today Stέλλα Kyrikidou, the former European Commissioner for Health and Food Safety, and a true leader in both developing and implementing Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan. We really have so much to thank you for. Commissioner Kyrikidou, as we look back from 5 years ago and with the passage of time, the political will and the excitement that you were able to summon for the creation of Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan was really quite extraordinary. And then that was matched by an appropriate budget provision. But thinking now of how to ensure the future of Europe's cancer plan in the next EU budget, what sort of advice and reflections would you have? The world is different now to 2019. Can those who make those decisions on budgets be assured of the importance of cancer as a political priority?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Richard, it's a great pleasure to be part of this panel and to see good friends, but I would say those who have staunchly advocated for health within the European Parliament, MEP Κουντουρά, and I see MEP Παπανδρέου there on screen, as well as Dr. Costa. If I may, just to go back to where we were at the very beginning, and I think it is important. We had a Europe's Speeding Cancer Plan that was in my mission letter when I first became commissioner, by President von der Leyen. So we started off with the belief that we needed to do something at the European level on a different scale with funding to change the realities of cancer within Europe. And then, of course, we all faced the pandemic. And what the pandemic showed us, it showed us the weakness of health systems, but also the importance of working together, the importance of solidarity, and the importance of building up resilience. And I believe that there was also a shift, and it's a shift that we must not lose, that health is not only a matter that concerns the health ministries. Health has an economic dimension and a social dimension. And we saw with the pandemic, because of a pandemic, when everything came to a standstill, how economies also came to a standstill. So what I would first point for myself, that at least I will be advocating on and using my voice every day going forward, is that we need to keep health at the top of the political agenda. And the European Parliament has always been a very loud supporter, because the Commission puts forward proposals, but these proposals need to be discussed and adopted by the European Parliament. And the fact that we have a standalone program for the first time with a budget of over 5 billion when it started out, EU for Health, came because the European Parliament, across all political groups, supported this. And personally, as a former commissioner, I can only thank them. But now we have a changing landscape, and it is clear that the priorities are changing, and we are seeing that the next MFF proposal consolidates health and EU for Health into a broader European competitiveness fund. The MFF is what sets the ceilings and provides for the EU long-term budget. And it determines how much will go to health. This incorporation into the Competitiveness Fund has the positive aspect that it could increase efficacy and also simplification. But, and this is where I think we all need to work together, it also raises questions about the visibility and the stability of cancer funding. And this is personally one of my concerns, because we are going to go forward with competing budget priorities, and this will bring an uncertainty about how much we have earmarked for cancer funding. So I believe that we need together, as stakeholders, as policymakers, work very closely with the European Parliament to keep health as the top of a political priority, despite the changing geopolitical situation, and secondly, to keep cancer at the top of the agenda. Otherwise, we could be seeing, I would say, an under-prioritization of many of the actions that we started 5 years ago.
Thank you, Commissioner. And some very important points there, I think, about the relationship between the investment in cancer and what it can achieve for economies, and the reminder that actually some of the first conceptions of a cancer plan came from the European Parliament. In a way, it is a baby of the European Parliament.
Also, if I may say, it's quite important to underline what Commissioner Kyriakides said about the health system being also a mechanism for economic growth and social solidarity and social welfare, actually. And I think, well, for me as an economist, this makes sense, but I think that this is an important message that should be conveyed across the discussions taking place currently at the European level, and probably, if I may say so, among the finance ministers, because they are the people with the money. Let me turn to Professor Costa for our next comment on this. Dr. Costa, yeah. Can you hear us? Perfect, thank you. You had the front row seat, actually, to both the drafting of the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan and all the early stages of its implementation. Could you please share with us what are some key principles that underline the plan? What challenges had to be overcome to implement it? And was it worthwhile?
If I may, before you give the floor, if I may just for a minute, because something that many don't know is that Professor Costa was the European Commission's special advisor for the cancer plan from day one for its implementation. So I always like to say that because he may have gone unnoticed, but he was really the one that kept the eye on this plan throughout the pandemic, and I have a lot to thank him for.
Dr. Costa, we cannot hear you. Θα μπορούσαμε να κάνουμε κάτι παρακαλώ με τη σύνδεση του καθηγητή Κώστα, να το φτιάχνουμε.
Ο ίδιος πρέπει να κάνει.
Dr. Costa, we heard you for a second there. Can we try again?
No, I think that was... that's a way to do it, I think, yeah. Should... Το ξέρω, το έχουμε πει. Should we proceed with Nίκος Παπανδρέου and then come back to Professor Costa?
We'll go to our next speaker.
Okay, we try now?
All right, that's perfectly good, yeah.
Yeah. The microphone was closed by the organizer. I could not open it. Yeah. It's like in my family. Shut up. Okay. So, kalimera σας. Of course, okay, you call Stέλλα Κυριακίδου former commissioner, but Stella will remain the cancer commissioner anyway. No offense to the other commissioners, but that was, her mandate was really the one which changed dramatically the fight against cancer in Europe. So this has to remain. And this basically, you were asking for which reasons. I think from my experience, the first reason is that cancer is on top, as you know, of the concerns of European citizens, like together with unemployment and war and defense. So when the citizen is also seen as taxpayer, for the European taxpayers to see Europe spending and investing money against cancer, it's a great relief. It's part of building Europe. And this is because in this field, we always suffered a little bit the comparison with the US, because they started the first national cancer plan in '73, imagine. And this is because they have a federal budget, and we don't. So they can have, you don't have a plan for Oklahoma or for Arkansas, you have an American plan. We did overlap and spend and did not rational investment because we were all having our own national cancer plan. So the great importance of having a European cancer plan, it's enormous for the resources that can be put, but mostly for the resources that can be used much better and with a much greater impact. The second reason is that the plan has boosted and has facilitated European medicine. Europe cannot, we have to stop. There is no French medicine, Italian medicine, Greek medicine. We all need each other, and we know very well. And we also need because of the different size of the countries. Nikolai Goncharenko in the previous panel session said it very well. How can you expect a country like Luxembourg to have all the knowledge and all the facilities to treat all the type of cancer. The small countries, I see Andrέas Χαραλάμπους from Cyprus, I see, of course we need to integrate. And we need an integrated European medicine, cancer medicine. So these to me are the main two reasons.
Now, coming back to, I hope you're still alive. Yeah, thank you. Coming back to the resources element, many of the decision makers currently on the EU budget do not have particular responsibility on health policy, such as finance ministers, as we said previously. How do you think that they can be convinced that investment in cancer is a political priority that brings a return on investment?
I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember what we did with the first plan in '91, the so-called Europe Against Cancer plan. And I remember the Minister of Finances wanted to kill us because we were proposing to put the warning on the cigarettes packets, smoke kills. And they were, of course, seeing that they were losing a lot of money if we had done a proper fight against tobacco, because all the governments take and get a lot of money from the tobacco taxation. But then they started to realize that in reducing tobacco and reducing mobility, they were saving money in other parts, less cost for the health system, more people continuing to work. And I remember this as a switch. For the first time, the Minister of Finances say, hey, hold on, maybe we can also have a financial implication in this. And the other reason is that this can release resources in research. Research generates patents, generates technology, and generates industrial production and income. So the first plan was certainly proved to be effective. You may remember it was checked by the IARC in Lyon, and they concluded that the goal was achieved of reducing mortality for cancer with the 5-year plan. This recent plan will certainly give even better results because it was much stronger and much more articulated. So I wouldn't be afraid to go back and expect the Minister of Finances to understand the importance of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Costa. And I'd love to be able to say that the debate's moved on a lot on tobacco, but in fact, even at the moment, with a new tobacco products directive in the making, not every country has been helpful towards that being as ambitious as it should. But anyway, I think if there was some concerning news about what the Commission has proposed for its next budget, the good news is that the European Parliament has an important say in what the final budget is. So we're delighted to have two members of the European Parliament joining us now for their reflections. And we'll turn first to Nikos Papandreou, who is a very active member of the European Parliament Sant Committee. So that's the Health Committee. And Nikos, can you share with us how is the discussion in the Parliament going on the next EU budget, and what sort of predictions do you have for the dialogue and the decision-making ahead? And do you think that Greece's presidency of the EU could be important in this respect?
Hello to everybody. Ευχαριστώ. Καλημέρα στους όλους τους συμμετέχοντες. Κυρία Κυριακίδη, χάρηκα πολύ που σας βλέπω. I was at the end of her commission, but I think her legacy, we try and continue with the emphasis she had on prevention and population-based screening. So that was an important legacy that we're continuing now in the Health Committee. But the SND in particular, the Socialists and Democrats, have put health at a very high priority. Because today, I think we heard earlier that there is a problem, and I was very happy to hear Mr. Costa's analysis of the past. that finance ministers can actually be convinced. That's good news, because it's a long-term effect from short-term spending. So in politics, because the cycle is 4 years usually, people don't like to give money that they don't see within their own ministership having effects. So we're trying to fight that. Now, the new approach, as everybody knows, and I think you pointed it out in the beginning, means that we're all at risk in the health to be underfunded. The discussion, however, is still very open. But the new flexible budget architecture, which has fewer named programs like EU for Health, gives more discretion for national governments and the council. So in this new model, health is treated as being eligible but doesn't have guaranteed funding. So it's eligible if we can prove that it'll have effects, but it's not guaranteed. So from our Socialist Democrat perspective, we're pushing hard against that perspective and that logic. We have asked for a complete budget of 90 billion, and it's not so extreme because the last budget, MFF, the total was 80 billion, half of which was from the RFF, the Resilience Fund. So we're asking for 90. It's a big ask, but that's our goal. So far, the numbers have not been put down. So we do want the continuation of the EU for Health, a reset or reinforcement, and we want binding safeguards and minimum allocations. On cancer specifically, we want to continue the legacy of the Europe Cancer Plan, the Beating Cancer Plan, and we do not want it to disappear into the generic competitiveness. It's not clear what it means competition in terms of beating cancer. We're not talking about drugs, we're talking about results from people who are sick, but that's not clear how that's so competitive. We need to do studies to convince the ministers that that'll improve the health of the economy, etc. We're also working hard for the 2 billion for a standalone cancer plan, which was in the past. So there is, unfortunately, lots of resistance in the council, especially from some net contributors to anything that'll give specific numbers. So some big net contributors, you can imagine which countries those are, don't want us to pin down those numbers from what we understand so far. But as you said, Parliament has some strength, and S&D in particular, which the whole, all 130 of us, 36 of us are in favor of a strong health program. We've even proposed health for all committees to be subset in all the committees, health for all we call it. So I think we won't get everything that we want, but we will get some of it. So it's the typical, unfortunately, it shouldn't be that for health, lobbying effort that goes on in a good sense, lobbying, that we have to push the commissioners and the council to agree to put health as a top priority, which, you know, it's strange. Whenever health, in terms of priorities, health discussions in the plenary at Strasbourg are on Thursday afternoon. Thursday afternoon is when everybody has left, because people leave around 12 o'clock on Thursday. So that just shows how, until now, the priority for health from the system, so to speak, that I've been working in is not very high. And of course, we do expect the Greek and the Cypriot presidency a good chance to keep health quite high. And we hope to convince both the Minister of Health, who has in Greece has some sway over the government, and the Minister of Finance to include that in looking at this word competitiveness, which when you put it with health sounds very odd, but that's going to be the new world, that we need a more flexible budget to be competitive in the geopolitical shifting sands of the geopolitical world. So for me, though, I don't think we can put health so easily into that. And our group at S&D is to make it a high priority. Will we win? We'll get something. For asking for a lot, as you know, we'll get something. Let's see what we get. That's my basic introduction. Thank you.
I think that, thank you very much for that. I think that apart from the budget headroom, there's also an issue on as things are planned to be set up, an issue on the coordination of the programs that will be eligible for funding. And by coordination, I mean, should they be structured towards a common European goal for health and for health metrics and for health objectives. And I think that this should also accompany the discussions for the budget allocation and the budget headroom for health. Επιτρέψτε μου να συνεχίσουμε λίγο στα ελληνικά και να συνεχίσουμε με έναν ακόμα εκπρόσωπο στο Κοινοβούλιο, με την κυρία Έλενα Κουντουρά. Η κυρία Κουντουρά βεβαίως έχετε μια ειδική οπτική στην συζήτηση, έχοντας ένα ρόλο πολυετή στην Επιτροπή ΦΕΜ και βεβαίως ως μέλος των ΜΕΠ Against Cancer, στο group αυτό. είναι πολύ σημαντικό να δούμε λίγο τα ζητήματα της ισότητας ή ανισότητας, αν θέλετε, στον καρκίνο και βεβαίως να δούμε αν έχετε κατανοήσει διαφορές, έχετε δει διαφορές ανάμεσα στην ατζέντα, κυρίως για τα θέματα τα οποία αφορούν στον καρκίνο στις γυναίκες, ένα πολύ σημαντικό θέμα. Νομίζω το οποίο δεν έχουμε δει επαρκώς στα προηγούμενα χρόνια και πώς μπορούμε να βελτιώσουμε τις προβλέψεις και τη φροντίδα για τις γυναίκες οι οποίες θα έρθουν αντιμέτωπες με τον καρκίνο και αντιμετωπίζουν, αν θέλετε, πολλαπλούς κοινωνικούς ρόλους στο πεδίο αυτό και πρέπει να δούμε ιδιαίτερες πολιτικές.
Καλημέρα σας, καλή εβδομάδα, καλό μήνα. Θα ήθελα να κάνω ένα μικρό σχόλιο σε αυτά που υπόθηκαν, που αφορά τον προϋπολογισμό και τη χρηματοδότηση, γιατί χωρίς τη χρηματοδότηση των πολιτικών που αποφασίζουμε, όπως καταλαβαίνετε, δεν μπορούμε να έχουμε αποτελέσματα. Γι' αυτό, λοιπόν, θέλουμε και πιέζουμε, όπως είπε και ο συνάδελφος, ο κύριος Παπανδρέου, για τον προϋπολογισμό στο καινούριο Πολυετές Δημοσιονομικό Πλαίσιο που είναι το 2028-2034, τουλάχιστον 2 δις ευρώ για την υγεία, γιατί όπως πολύ σωστά υπόθηκε πιο πριν και οι περισσότεροι που ασχολείστε στο χώρο της υγείας γνωρίζετε ότι η πρόληψη κοστίζει πολύ λιγότερο από ότι η θεραπεία. Αυτό λοιπόν, επειδή άκουσα για τους υπουργούς οικονομικών ότι το αντιλήφθησαν σχετικά αργά, αλλά τουλάχιστον τώρα έχουμε κάνει πρόοδο, δεν ήταν μόνο η εκστρατεία η αντικαπνιστική, είναι γενικά σε όλα τα θέματα που αφορούν τον καρκίνο και γι' αυτό και εμείς, ειδικά για τις γυναίκες, έρχομαι λοιπόν στο θέμα που εγώ τουλάχιστον εργάζομαι πάρα πολλά χρόνια, για να διασφαλίσουμε πολιτικές ισότητας, ισοτιμίας, ισότιμης πρόσβασης σε πρωτόκολλα, σε θεραπείες, βεβαίως είναι στόχος, αλλά η πρόληψη και η έγκαιρη διάγνωση, ειδικά για τον καρκίνο του μαστού, είναι αυτό που πρέπει να μας απασχολεί. Εδώ θέλω να σας πω ότι για μένα, όσο αφορά τον καρκίνο του μαστού, είναι και βαθιά πολιτική, αλλά και προσωπική διάσταση. Αγωνίζομαι, όπως γνωρίζετε, και αν με έχετε παρακολουθήσει σε προηγούμενα συνέδρια της ΕΛΛΟΚ, στην Επιτροπή ΦΑΜ, που αφορά στα δικαιώματα και στις ίσες ευκαιρίες των γυναικών και θέλω να ξέρετε ότι εκτός από το θεσμικό πλαίσιο υπάρχουν ανθρώπινες ιστορίες. Γυναίκες που έρχονται αντιμέτωπες με τον καρκίνο δεν χρειάζονται μόνο θεραπεία. Μιλάμε πρόληψη, έγκαιρη διάγνωση, αλλά εάν διαγνωστεί δεν είναι μόνο η θεραπεία. Οι γυναίκες χρειάζονται φωνή, διεκδικούν στην πράξη και τα δικαιώματα πρέπει να εφαρμόζονται στην πράξη, αξιοπρέπεια, ψυχολογική υποστήριξη και είναι πολλές πολιτικές που συνδυάζονται και χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ που έχουμε την κυρία Στέλλα Κυριακίδου διότι έκανε την Ευρωπαϊκή Στρατηγική στη θητεία της για τον καρκίνο, ένα σχέδιο και μια ευρωπαϊκή ατζέντα που έχει φέρει πολύ μεγάλη αλλαγή και ειδικότερα για τις γυναίκες, γιατί πλέον αντιμετωπίζονται ως μια ενιαία στρατηγική για την πρόληψη, τον προσυμπτωματικό έλεγχο και την έγκαιρη διάγνωση, την ισότιμη πρόσβαση στη θεραπεία. Είναι πολύ σημαντική η ποιότητα ζωής των ασθενών να αντιμετωπίζεται ως ενιαία στρατηγική. Και στον καρκίνο του μαστού αυτό που έχω να πω είναι ότι μεταφράζεται σε περισσότερα προγράμματα μαστογραφικού ελέγχου, τα οποία πρέπει να γίνονται καταρχήν οργανωμένα και να υπάρχει πρόσβαση. Γιατί δεν είναι μόνο τα ψηφιακά εργαλεία, η τεχνητή νοημοσύνη που βοηθούν στη διάγνωση, είναι η πρόσβαση σε βέλτιστες και σύγχρονες θεραπείες, σε φάρμακα, σε πρωτόκολλα, στην ολοκληρωμένη φροντίδα πριν, κατά τη διάρκεια, αλλά και μετά, στην ίδια χώρα και παρά την ευρωπαϊκή και εθνική, αν θέλετε, προσπάθεια για την καθιέρωση του πληθυσμιακού προσυμπτωματικού ελέγχου για τις συχνότερες μορφές καρκίνου, θέλω να σας πω ότι η Ελλάδα, με τα τελευταία στοιχεία της Eurostat, έδειξαν ότι είναι σχεδόν στην τελευταία θέση στον προληπτικό έλεγχο. Και σε αυτό παίζει ρόλο, ενώ οι σκανδιναβικές χώρες, οι βόρειες χώρες, είναι πρώτες. Σε αυτό όμως παίζει ρόλο οι γεωγραφικές ανισότητες, που παραμένουν μεγάλες. Στην Ελλάδα, στις απομακρυσμένες περιοχές και στα νησιά μας, πολλοί συμπολίτες μας και ειδικά οι γυναίκες, λόγω της απόστασης από τα αστικά κέντρα, αλλά και του υψηλού κόστους μετακινήσεων, δεν έχουν ισότιμη πρόσβαση στον προσυμπτωματικό έλεγχο ή στις βέλτιστες θεραπείες, όπως αντίστοιχα οι γυναίκες που είναι στα αστικά κέντρα. Επίσης, αν μία γυναίκα που νοσεί θα διαγνωστεί έγκαιρα ή θα λάβει τη βέλτιστη θεραπεία, καθορίζεται και εκτός από τα γεωγραφικά κριτήρια, από την οικονομική της κατάσταση και από το εργασιακό καθεστώς. Δεν θα ξεχάσω πέρυσι που έκανα και μία κατεπίγουσα ερώτηση, όταν μία αναπληρώτρια καθηγήτρια δέχτηκε, θα έλεγα, μία παράλογη απόφαση που έπρεπε να πάρει, ή να πηγαίνει να κάνει τις θεραπείες της για να θεραπευτεί από τον καρκίνο ή να μείνει στη δουλειά της, απλά γιατί οι αποστάσεις ήταν τεράστιες και έπρεπε αν ήθελε να προσέξει την υγεία της και να θεραπευτεί, να αφήσει τη δουλειά της. Αυτά είναι απίστευτα πράγματα που συμβαίνουν όταν δεν υπάρχουν ολοκληρωμένες πολιτικές που αφορούν την υγεία της ζωής μας και δεν γίνεται οι ίδιες οι γυναίκες να δίνουν λύσεις σε αυτά, όπως καταλαβαίνετε. Πρέπει λοιπόν οι λύσεις να δίνονται σε επίπεδο πολιτικών, μέσα από το ευρωπαϊκό πλαίσιο αλλά και το εθνικό πλαίσιο, και πρέπει να υπάρξει μεγαλύτερη, ειδικά στην Ελλάδα, σύγκληση με την Ευρώπη. Το πρόγραμμα αυτό που είδαμε, το EU Health, είναι η δεύτερη χρονιά που υλοποιείται. Βοηθάει ουσιαστικά έτσι ώστε τα επόμενα χρόνια, και ελπίζουμε να καλυφθεί αυτό το κενό, δηλαδή η γεωγραφική κάλυψη και τα προγράμματα του προσυμπτωματικού ελέγχου. Θέλω να σας πω ότι εδώ πολύ μεγάλο και σπουδαίο ρόλο παίζουν και οι μη κυβερνητικές οργανώσεις. Δηλαδή, ήμουνα πρόεδρος πάνω από 20 χρόνια της Ευρώπαντονα Ελλάς, που αφορά τον καρκίνο του μαστού. Η κυρία Επίτροπος το γνωρίζει, γιατί και εκείνη έχει ασχοληθεί στην Κύπρο. Σήμερα η πρόεδρος, η Φιωρίτα Πουλακάκη, που είναι επιστήμονας, και η αντιπρόεδρος Μιμή Μαρσέλου, που και εκείνη είναι επιστήμονας, τρέχουν τους βασικούς στόχους της Ευρώπαντονα, που είναι βασικοί στόχοι για την αντιμετώπιση του καρκίνου του μαστού. Καταρχήν, τα προγράμματα προληπτικού μαστογραφικού ελέγχου για όλες τις γυναίκες σε όλη την Ελλάδα, πάνω από 40 ετών. Εδώ θέλω να κάνω μία μικρή παρένθεση που ξέχασα να το πω πριν. Δεν είναι μόνο η μαστογραφία, είναι και το τεστ ΠΑΠ που οι γυναίκες παραμελούν. Και αυτό είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό. Πρέπει να δούμε τη λειτουργία στην πράξη του Εθνικού Μητρώου Καρκίνου, την ίδρυση και επιστοποίηση εξειδικευμένων διεπιστημονικών κέντρων μαστού σε όλη την ηπειρωτική νησιωτική Ελλάδα ως μέρος του δημόσιου συστήματος υγείας. Άκουσα πριν ότι υπάρχει υποστελέχωση, όχι μόνο σε νοσηλευτές, εγώ θα τονίσω και σε γιατρούς. Πόσες μονάδες εντατικής θεραπείας δεν μπορούν να λειτουργήσουν επειδή δεν υπάρχουν γιατροί και νοσηλευτές. Διασφάλιση της άριστης ποιότητας των υπηρεσιών του δημοσίου και του ιδιωτικού τομέα, την επιμόρφωση και την εξειδίκευση των επαγγελματιών υγείας, πλήρη ενημέρωση των ασθενών για όλες τις διαθέσιμες θεραπείες, τα πρωτόκολλα, ώστε να μπορούν να πάρουν τη σωστή απόφαση, οικονομική ενίσχυση φυσικά για την επιστημονική έρευνα. Και θα κλείσω λέγοντας ότι όλες αυτές οι πολιτικές, επειδή χρειάζονται χρήματα, διασφαλίζουν όχι μόνο την θεραπεία κατά τη διάρκεια, αλλά και μετά, και είναι ένα σύνολο υπηρεσιών που πρέπει να λαμβάνουν οι ασθενείς με καρκίνο, και φυσικά με καρκίνο του μαστού, και ιδιαίτερα όταν είναι γυναίκες, γιατί χρειάζονται την υποστήριξη. Όπως πολύ σωστά είπατε, υπάρχουν πολλοί ρόλοι. Είναι σύντροφος, μητέρα, και δυστυχώς όταν μία γυναίκα νοσεί, ξέρετε ότι όλη η οικογένεια μουδιάζει, όλη η οικογένεια υποφέρει. Είναι λοιπόν πάρα πολύ σημαντικό το να υπάρχει αυτή η απόλυτη πρόσβαση και σε θεραπεία και υποστήριξη ψυχολογική ακόμα και για την οικογένεια αν χρειάζεται και φυσικά άλλα δικαιώματα για τα οποία δεν έχουμε συζητήσει πολύ, όπως είναι το δικαίωμα στη λύθη, δηλαδή μια γυναίκα όταν ξεπεράσει τον καρκίνο να μπορεί να ζήσει μια φυσιολογική ζωή, να έχει εργασία, να μπορεί να ασφαλιστεί, πράγματα τα οποία ακόμα τα διεκδικούμε και θεωρώ ότι χρειάζεται και πολιτική βούληση και επένδυση στη δημόσια υγεία και ισχυρή έμφυλη διάσταση σε όλες τις πολιτικές μας. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Η αλήθεια είναι ότι το θέμα του καρκίνου στις γυναίκες δεν το έχουμε δει επαρκώς, ενώ τον καρκίνο στις γυναίκες, όχι από την κλινική του σκοπιά, αλλά τον καρκίνο στις γυναίκες ως τον κοινωνικό ρόλο της γυναίκας σήμερα, όπου είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικός και βεβαίως δεν είναι ο μόνος ο ρόλος του ως ασθενής όταν αυτό θα τύχει, αλλά ως εργαζόμενη, ως ο άνθρωπος που συνήθως τρέχει την οικογένεια στις πιο πολλές χώρες μεταξύ αυτών και στη δική μας. Δεν το λέω έτσι αυτό. Έχουμε κάνει κάτι γι' αυτό και θέλουμε να συμβάλλουμε στη συζήτηση. Ακριβώς για αυτόν τον λόγο, για να αναδείξουμε το θέμα. Θα σας στείλω τα αποτελέσματα της μελέτης, η οποία τελείωσε μόλις το Σαββατοκύριακο. Ακριβώς για να βάλουμε προτάσεις στο κομμάτι αυτό, οι προτάσεις που δεν αφορούν απλώς το σύστημα, αλλά αφορούν το σύστημα της επιχειρήσης, την κοινωνία και το καθεξής.
Να προσθέσω μόνο ότι ο καρκίνος του μαστού είναι 100% ιάσιμος εάν προβλεφθεί έγκαιρα. Είναι πολύ σημαντικό αυτό να το γνωρίζουν οι γυναίκες, γιατί η γρήγορη έγκαιρη διάγνωση, πρόληψη και γρήγορη έγκαιρη διάγνωση μπορεί να της χαρίσει μία μακράν διάρκεια ζωής. Είναι ένας καρκίνος που πραγματικά θεραπεύεται. Γι' αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό και να μην το ξεχνάμε.
Thank you. A lot of very interesting points there, and I think the issue of care burden as well is one that we want to try and promote. The women are primarily taking that role across Europe, and if we want a competitive agenda, I think it would be good to address that topic too. I'd now like to turn to Professor Χαραλάμπους, who's been very active in Cyprus in making sure that institutions and entities there are engaged and active in the cancer plan, and indeed in projects relevant to the most recent remarks on telehealth and how we can find new ways to bring care to people in geographic challenging areas. But Professor Andreas, all eyes are on Cyprus at the moment. It's holding the presidency of the EU at the current time. You've been working with PASICAF and local stakeholders and politicians to try to bring the attention of the Cyprus government to the need to maintain cancer and health in the next EU budget. Could you share some of that work and how you've seen that so far? And are there any initiatives in the future that maybe our audience should be aware of?
Thank you so much, Richard, for the question, and thank you, ΕΛΛΟΚ, for the opportunity to be here and convey my experience and expertise on the topic that you have just mentioned. Let me start by saying that the EU Beating Cancer Plan was undoubtedly one of the most political commitments made by the Commission in order to change cancer care across Europe. But the plan itself, it doesn't mean much unless there is a corresponding national commitment as well. So we need both in order to have an alignment, in order to be able to change things to the right direction. In Cyprus, I believe we are privileged and lucky because the EU Beating Cancer Plan came at a time with an already national cancer plan in place, a national strategy for cancer care in place. So the plan and the EU Cancer Mission gave us the opportunity to invest, structure, and restructure where possibly in order to change cancer care and improve the services provided to people affected by cancer. I know that I'm not here to project an utopic picture about how Cyprus has managed to do things, but let's face it, we all love success stories. And I do believe that Cyprus have managed in aligning the two to project very successful examples. The revision of the breast cancer screening program based on the new recommendations launched as a result of the EU Cancer Plan in 2022. As a result of the same recommendations, we are now exploring launching the screening programs for prostate cancer as well as lung cancer. And as we speak, the colorectal screening program has already been launched. The MEP mentioned the right to be forgotten. Cyprus was one of the first countries to instigate this right to cancer survivors, which I believe makes a huge change for those who manage to survive the disease and actually have a life after the disease and not being defined by cancer until the end of their lives. There's many other areas where we can mention success stories. And at this point, I would like to put my researcher's hat. I'm also privileged to lead EU for Health funded projects, such as Transition, Intervene, and also lead aspects of the joint action of ECAN Plus. What we do with these projects, for example, Transition, it builds the capacity of the oncology workforce in dealing with the challenging aspects of cancer care across Europe, especially with the rise of digital technology across health and, of course, cancer care. The project Intervene aims to raise the health literacy and digital health literacy, not only for patients and caregivers, but also for healthcare professionals and citizens, because unfortunately, what we see in terms of health literacy is that we have a long way to cover, because we develop technology, but we are not adequately prepare the people to put technology into action. And of course, ECAN Plus joint action works towards making the digital capabilities of member states to improve to a higher level. And these are only some of the success stories that I could mention from the Cyprus point of view. And as Richard, you mentioned initiatives in order to support the new MFF in order to put or maintain cancer and healthcare in the spotlight. Last year, we launched the Larnaca Call, which called for an action for governments and MEPs in order to make sure that the plan stays focused on health and cancer. This year, on the 29th of April, we will meet again in order to see what we have achieved in this year, but also what new evidence have emerged in this year that can support the case further on. There's many more I could mention, because there is another dimension that I haven't heard anyone mentioning so far. The EU Beating Cancer Plan made Europe an international focal point when it comes to digital technology, for example, the European Health Data Space, the AI Act. Those things are things that no one speaks about at the moment, but we are pioneers in setting the pace on how artificial intelligence will be implemented in the present, but also in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas. And you touched on the sort of lesser heard stories of success from the plan, how it stimulates national action that might not otherwise have happened, but also that return on investment that can be bought from investing in training schemes that all of Europe can use, rather than having 27 training schemes for AI and cancer. Like DigiCan Train, we can make something available for everybody. So I'm conscious of time, and we do need to bring matters to a close, but before we do so, I'd really love to hear the thoughts and reflections of Commissioner Kyriakidis on what you've heard and some of the thoughts it stimulated for you.
Thank you. Well, a great deal has been said. If I may touch on a point that we don't have the time to discuss it today, which is women's health. But Elena raised a number of points and what we need to do, not only for prevention, early diagnosis, treatment, but for life after breast cancer. And a friend of mine, Katerina, today said something which I noted down, that women should not only survive, because we use the word survivor, but they should thrive after going through a cancer experience. And this issue of thriving after cancer, I think, is going to be one of the most important topics that we're going to be looking at over the next few years. In terms of what has been discussed, first of all, how can we, I think economy and economics and economists are very important part of the discussion. And for many years, we as policymakers dealing with health, as stakeholders of organizations dealing with cancer, kept this part of the equation out of it. And I think it needs to be part of also our language to put economics in our language when we're discussing health policy and when we're advocating. MEP Papandreou, I never use the word lobbying. It's not a word that...
it has a negative word.
Yes. I heard that he was also very careful. When we're advocating for healthcare, we need to put economics in our language and in our agenda. And when we're seeing ministers about health policies, we need also to see the ministers of finance and not only the health ministers, because health is also about economics, and we need to also put that into our language and our work. Now, what we have, and I believe in being pragmatic, is a proposal to have the health program and health being consolidated into the broader European Competitiveness Fund. Is there only a negative side of this? I would say no, because what it can do is also streamline funding and integrate funding. But what we need to ensure at the same time is that we don't dilute the funding, and that, especially in the area of cancer, there is a sustained long-term commitment. And this is something that I believe can be discussed, whether within the Competitiveness Fund we can have a structure that will be dedicated to health, so as to ensure that we have implementation, we have actions that we can actually follow up, because nobody is really discussing yet about who will be doing what with this change, so that we don't lose sight of health and of cancer, even if this is now within a broader network, a broader framework of competitiveness. So I think this is something that the European Parliament can see very carefully through the Santa Committee. And last but not least, it was mentioned, I think, by Andreas, by Professor Χαραλάμπους. What came out of a very difficult time of the pandemic was not only a Europe-beating cancer plan, but what came out was a change in the way we saw health. And we spoke of the European Health Union, which had cancer plan as one part of it, the European Health Data Space, and I'm now being in Greece, seeing all the mobile phones with the personal records on the phones. This digitalization in health, what we have achieved, came out of a very difficult period that we all went through as a continent, but also as globally. These we need to not lose sight of and keep it high on our agenda and keep health at the top of the political agenda, because societies cannot function without health. We saw it with the pandemic, we forget very easily, but we need to advocate for this all the time. And thank you.